All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So today we're going to be talking about the end of World War One for you guys. Yay, you made it all the way through. All right. So this lesson's actually pretty short. Excuse me. As for the notes, but there is a lot of information because again, how the war ended, um, it's going to cause a ripple effect. Now, if you don't know what that means, if you ever seen like someone drop something in water, that initial drop of water or whatever it is in the water, that's can be seen as something being done, and the ripples that follow, at first it's small, right? But as time goes on, that ripple gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's exactly what happens. Something happens at the end of World War One that's going to cause an effect that's going to lead up to World War Two. Okay, it's not the reason, but it's one of the reasons why World War II started. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with this lesson. All right, so we're going to analyze the reason why Russia got out of the war. We're going to examine the importance of the Treaty of Versailles, and we're going to create an argument on whether the end of the war was predestined. Yeah, there's a weird little thing at the end of the war where um, people notice like something interesting, and we're like, I wonder if it was predestined already. If people paid attention, they would have known this would have been the end of the war, this exact day. Okay, so we're going to talk about that. Okay, so let's go ahead and get to your warm up. All right, so here it is. Okay, now the question is asking you, um, basically, what do you think this artist is trying to say? Sorry about that. I had to sneeze. But again, what do you think this artist is trying to say about the treaty process? Okay. Now, if you don't know, when a war ends, um, in order for there to be peace, the losing side basically has to give up something and things like that. So, based off what you see here, how do you think that process is being done? You think it's being done fairly? Who looks like it has the bigger advantage, the uh the winning side or the losing side, and why do you say that? Basically, what's the one side doing to the other? Okay, so think about it, analyze this picture. Okay, because we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right, April 1915, the second battle of Ypres happens. Now, why is this battle so important? Basically, this is the first time in world history that poison gas is used in the war. Now, here's the thing, if you were right in the thick of it, right in the middle of the gas where the gas was really thick, basically, if you don't know this, your body is made of predominantly water. And when you breathe in this gas, especially mustard gas was the one used at the Battle of Ypres. Basically, your lungs will get filled with that water from your body, and you would basically drown in your own water in your body. It was a horrible way to die. Now, those people who didn't get the the middle part of the gas, if they got the outside of it where the gas wasn't as thick, you know, they still got hurt. Number one thing, people vomited. Their throats. They would go from sounding like this to sounding like this. Because again, it tore up their throats, and there's nothing they could do. You know, and coughing, sneezing, things like that would really hurt their throats for the rest of their lives. Blindness was another one. Some people get like tunnel vision. So like if you put your hand like this and you put it right to your eye, that's all you could see. You know, a lot of times it was the outside was blocked and you only see like a little pinhole size. So imagine living your life like that. Another one, suffocation. People had breathing problems, coughing up all the time, and there was nothing to cough up. It's just their lungs were so damaged. Okay. This, because of that battle, gas mask became a necessary part of a soldier's equipment. And believe it or not, it's still the same thing today. Today. Um, when soldiers go into boot camp and stuff like that, they're trained. to put on a gas mask. Okay. Um, it's one of those things that we do, and it's still, again, relevant to this day. So since 1915, over 100 years ago, so our soldiers are still trained how to properly put on gas masks and things like that. 1916, tanks are introduced by Britain. Britain brings out these tanks, and the thing is, again, they're not very effective. They're very slow. They're unreliable. They fall into a crater. It's really hard for them, especially if it's been raining, for them to get out because all that mud and stuff like that. And then because of the weight of it, it's like kicking in the dirt, so it's just bringing them more and more into the ground. And they were easy to destroy. They weren't made sturdy. They weren't made with tough metal. You know. Uh, and if you've ever played the game Battlefield One, on the campaign they do a really good job of where you have to get out and fix the tank because again it broke down quite a bit. Now here's the thing: when the United States joined the war, none of their ships that carried soldiers got sunk. Now, if you remember from the previous lessons, the merchant ships, the ships carrying food, and equipment and things like that, those got sunk. But the ones carrying soldiers, they didn't. Why? Because those ships had guns. Those ships had depth charges. So if a submarine came by, yeah, we'll find you. We'll blow you up. You know. Um, and in March 1917, something happened in Russia. Basically, the people had enough. Okay, and this is the time too where politicians and the world leading governments realize, yeah, we just can't walk all over our people because they will unite, they will riot, and that's what happened in Russia. um People were really upset. The war was very unpopular, and the thing is, the Russians had no problem just sacrificing their soldiers to win a battle. And people were like, no, you should care about your soldiers. Those are our sons, our husbands, our brothers, things like that. And yeah, they didn't like the way the government was handling not only the war, but resources, food, and fuel. You know, the people in Russia who were not fighting were starving. The top people, the officials, government officials, and things like that, they were living large. They were living well. While the soldiers were rationing their food, the people at home were starving. So yeah, they had enough, and they basically overthrew the Russian government. Now that guy you see in that picture right there, that is Vladimir Lenin. He was the leader of the Bolshevik Party, and he was the guy who was in charge of overthrowing the Russian government, and they did. And they basically established themselves to be a communist government. Now, when he took over, the first thing he said was, "Okay, we're out of the war." Okay, he tells basically Germany, "We're out of the war. We want to get out of this. Let's talk. Let's make a deal." So on March 3rd, 1918, a treaty was signed between Russia and Germany. Okay, now again, just like I told you in the warm up, when you're on the losing side of a war, you have to give up things. Number one thing is usually land, and that's exactly what happened. Russia had to give up uh, the country of Ukraine, Finland, and area they owned in the Polish and the Baltic territories. They had to give that up to Germany. Okay, and then once Germany had that, they're like, okay, fine, now you're out of the war. See you later. And the thing is, like I said in class, Germany was fighting two fronts, two battles. They were fighting against the Russians on this side and the British and the French on this side. Okay, so they were fighting both sides, both sides, both sides, right? Now that the Russians are done, they quit. Now the Germans are like, well, now we can focus on the British and the French and the Belgians, and then we can really take over and beat them. But again, the problem was those soldiers had been fighting for like 4 years. They're tired, they're exhausted, they're hurt. And now the US is coming in and their soldiers are pumped. They're ready. They've been only fighting for like a couple months. They still have that energy. They still have that, you know, the drive, and so Germany is like, okay, well, we can't match them. They're driven. They're ready to go. So what happened was on July 15th, 1918, they decided to basically pump themselves up and give one last push, one last fight to try to gain territory, because they felt, hey, if we gain territory, then that will motivate our soldiers to keep fighting and make them feel like, hey, we can do this, we can still win this war. But at the Second Battle of Marne, they fought and they didn't advance. They didn't gain any territory, and they had to fall back. Now, here's the thing, like I said in class, if somebody you're fighting throws a haymaker, just I mean, total wow, coming at you, and they totally miss, and they overextend, and their back of their head is facing you. What are you gonna do? And a lot of students said in class, well, I'd slug them in the back of the head, or in the back, or some, right? And that's a typical response. Hey, you're in a fight, and they're throwing a haymaker, and they totally miss, and they're out of position that where they can't hit you. You're gonna hit them, right? Well, that's what some people thought the Americans and the French were going to do. Now that the Germans tried to attack and now they're going backwards, some people thought, well, why do you attack right there? And then the French and Americans actually waited 3 days to do a counterattack. In war, that's unheard of. You don't hear about the other side saying, well, let's just wait 3 days. Let's let them go back and recuperate, think about what the next plan is. But that's what the French did. And when they finally did attack, luckily the Germans were not prepared. They were not at full strength, and they started running. And to a lot of people, this is the true beginning of the end of World War One, because now the Germans are running. They're not standing their ground. Now, President Wilson of the United States called a session of Congress and basically says, hey, I know a way to prevent any more of these world wars from happening. Okay. And he called for a League of Nations. That was the last point of all his 14 points. Now, what the League of Nations would do was basically it was a grouping of nations: America, Britain, France, Belgium, Italy, things like that, right? Um, they were to help preserve peace and prevent future wars from happening by pledging to respect and protect each other's territories and political independence. Now, if someone tried to act a fool and try to pick a fight with one of these guys, all of them would unite and say, tell that country, okay, you need to back off, because you pick on them, you're picking on all of us. Okay. So think of it like this: if you have a family, a large family, if someone like starts picking on your little cousin, your little brother, your family is going to be right there. All your cousins, your brothers, all that are going to look at that person who's trying to pick on your family member and be like, yeah, that's not a wise thing to do. You know, and same thing, vice versa. If your little cousins try to pick a fight with somebody big, you're gonna be like, hey, calm down. Yeah, I get what you're trying to do, but you need to calm down. That's exactly what the League of Nations is supposed to be about. Making sure no one fought, no one got picked on, and nobody was being bullying another person. You know. So October 1918, the Ottoman Empire basically says, okay, we're done. We're done with this war. We want to sign a treaty. Okay, we're done fighting. So they do with the Allies. Okay, November 4th, Austria Hungary reaches an armistice, which means they agree to stop fighting. Um, it's kind of like a truce. If you ever been in that situation where you're fighting somebody and you're both really tired, you're both exhausted, you're both hurt, and you go, okay, you done? Because I'm done. That's that's the truth. Okay. Um, thing is, when Germany hears that Austria-Hungary reaches an armistice, they're like, "You guys are weak. No, you're supposed to fight to the end. You're supposed to fight to the last man. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna keep fighting. We're gonna go to the end." Well, about a week later, they reached an armistice. They were the ones like, "Okay, we can't fight anymore by ourselves. Yeah, we need to end this war." And that happened on November 11th, 1918. So once that happened, um, basically when Germany says, "Okay, we want an armistice," that ends World War One. So at Paris, they had a peace conference where all the Allied countries, America, Britain, France, Belgium, and all these other countries, basically got together and said, "Okay, what do we want? Because we're on the winning side. What do we want? And what can we do to prevent any more future world wars from happening?" So they talk and they talk and things like that. Now, if you were in my class several months ago, you might remember me telling you how France was basically embarrassed by Germany. And one of the questions I asked you was, do you think France is going to get revenge on Germany? And a lot of you guys said yes, you think they will. Maybe not right away, but sometime. Well, this is the time where France was waiting for. They were waiting for this moment in history so they could punish Germany, and that's exactly what they do. June 28th, 1919, the Treaty of Versailles is signed, and basically the Germany is forced to agree to these. Okay, they had to get rid of their army. That's one thing. So they were stripped of their armed forces. They could not have an army at all. They had to pay reparations, meaning they had to pay for everything in the war, every bullet, every tank, every meal that I was paid for, all that stuff. Um, Germany had to pay for, and also they had to basically acknowledge and admit that they were at fault for World War One happening. They're the reasons why World War One happened, and they're responsible for everything, everyone who died, all the buildings that were destroyed, all the lives that were lost, and things like that. It was the Germans' fault. Now, if you remember from a couple weeks ago, Germany didn't start the war. That was between Austria Hungary and Serbia. When Archduke Ferdinand got shot, Germany wasn't involved. But because they were the last group to surrender and France wanted revenge on them, they made sure that Germany paid for everything and looked, or basically humiliated. And this is the part where I tell you, this is the pebble in the pond. This is what's going to happen later on when we get to World War II. This thing um, kind of helps get some country, Germany, to want to fight and get revenge. Okay, and it's a motivation for those soldiers. So that's signed, that's done. Now, a lot of the countries around the world were like, yeah, we like this whole League of Nation things. So Belgium, France, Russia, Britain, Italy, they start saying, okay, we're going to join. They start signing up. They start signing up, and then they look at the United States and say, hey, it's your guys' idea. You going to join up? And Americans go, no, because here's the thing: under Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution, a president can make a treaty. A president has the right to go to Russia, to go to Vietnam, to the Middle East, wherever he wants to, and basically make a deal with them for peace. Okay? He has that power to do that, to make an agreement. But in order for that agreement to be legit, Congress has to approve it. So the president can make up the paperwork and all the agreements and stuff like that. But in order for it to be official, Congress has to approve it. And there was a lot of Americans who were like, so wait, let me get this right. Let me get this straight in my head. The League of Nations says that if something happens with one of our friends, we have to go and help them, right? So if they act the fool, or if someone's picking on them, we have to go across the Atlantic Ocean to Europe and settle that problem, settle that issue. Yeah, that sounds about right. Then no, no, we don't want that. Why? Well, because look at Europe is across the ocean. If they have a problem, let them handle it. What's that got to do with us? We're America. We're way over here. Europe's over here. We're over here. There's an ocean between us. Why should we have to go fight or help solve problems that has nothing to do with us? If there's a problem with Canada or Mexico, sure, okay, they're our neighbors. We can, you know, handle that situation. But Europe is across the ocean. That has nothing to do with us. Let France and Germany and Belgium, all those countries who want to join the League of Nations, let them deal with that because, again, those countries are right next to their countries and let them deal with that. That's their neighborhood. That has nothing to do with us. So that's why a lot of Americans didn't support the League of Nations. They were like, we can't be the world police. You know, we shouldn't be. We should only be worried about places like in Canada, Mexico, Colombia, on our side of the world. We'll deal with that kind of stuff. Let Europe deal with their own problems. Okay, so that's why the US didn't join. So here's my last question for you. Do you think the Americans should have joined? We're supposed to be allies and buddies with Britain and France and, countries like that. We're supposed to support them. They're supposed to support us. But at the same time, they're ocean across. Again, like I said just a couple minutes ago, um, how a lot of Americans felt. Hey, what happens in Europe should stay in Europe. What happens in the Americas, we'll deal with that stuff. We should not get involved with other people's things. That's them over there. That's their neighborhood. You know, or do you think, hey, no, we made a commitment. This whole League of Nations thing was our idea. We should join. So, what do you believe? Which side would you fall on? Okay, and explain why. Why do you feel that way? Okay. So once you finish this question, you are done with this lesson. So hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you enjoyed this whole World War One section. Okay. Um, so with that being said, you guys, you take care, you be safe, and I'll see you guys later. Okay.